I will let you know when we hand it over to you. Okay?
了解。
是，好，那我这里就先简单的介绍一下，各位好，我是那个国网中心助理研究员杨安正。那这一次我们很荣幸，那个有争取到预算来进行这个 MerckIndex Online 的采购，然后我们希望能借由引入这么一个高品质的化学的资料库来提升我们国内的这些那个为我们国内社群带来一些正向的研究的帮助。那我时间就交由那个 Henry 来，就请你再帮我们就那个带领那个Helen 进行今天的演讲，谢谢。
Okay. So Helen, the time is all yours. I hand it over to you now because I have done my introduction. So fire away. Thanks. You're still in mute. We cannot hear you.
My apologies. I will just share my and get started. Are you able to see my screen? So, good morning. My name is Helen. I am a content editor on the MerckIndex Online, and I'm here today to give you a short introduction to the MerckIndex Online. I work on MerckIndex Online with my colleague Sarah, who is in the meeting, and also my colleague Adrian, who was supposed to be here, but unfortunately he is unwell. So this morning, I'm going to give a brief look at the history and the coverage of the MerckIndex Online. So what is it and what is in it? Then I'm going to go through our records, which we call monographs. And then I'm going to give you a live demonstration of the platform, and then a quick look at how we create the content for the MerckIndex Online. And please type any questions into the Teams chat as we go, and my colleague Sarah will flag them to me as soon as possible, and so we can answer your questions as we go through this presentation. So the first area I'm going to cover is what is the MerckIndex Online and what is in it. So the MerckIndex Online has a long history, and it is best described as an encyclopedia of chemical substances. I guess kind of Wikipedia, but a lot older. So some of you may be familiar with the MerckIndex Online from the book, which has been found in libraries and in laboratories around the world for over 100 years. So this book began being published by the Merck Chemical Company in 1889, all through the 20th century. And they eventually made a CD version as well. And we acquired the rights to this content in 2013 when we made the MerckIndex Online, which is a website. So our website contains about 12,000 entries on chemical substances, and this covers nearly 20,000 chemical substances. And the advantage of a website over a book is that we have no space limits. So obviously with a book, sometimes they would have to take out old content to put in new content for the next edition. So our website has all content from the 15th edition, which is the most recent, plus anything they had to take out from the previous 3 editions. And in addition, my team and I have been writing new content for this website since 2013, which is another advantage over a book in that we can write new content and make it immediately available to you so that you can use it in your research, in your interests, and we can continuously update this product and make it bigger and better. So what is covered in the MerckIndex Online? It actually has an extremely broad coverage. So we say any substance that is of interest or use to a chemist. We have a lot of small molecules, but we also cover proteins, enzymes, we have some extracts, we have biologics, we have polymers, we have things with different industrial uses, we have drugs, we have agrochemicals. So to give some examples, we have enzymes that can go in industrial processes, we have titanium dioxide, we have a gene therapy, we have an extract of a plant called dragon's blood, we have whiskey that you can drink is in there. But because of the historical focus of when it belonged to the Merck Chemical Company, about half of our content is pharmaceutical compounds, which obviously now also includes monoclonal antibodies and some gene therapies. So, our records on the MerckIndex Online are divided up into what we call a monograph, and a monograph is all the information we have about a particular substance. So this is on the right, a quick picture, don't worry, you don't need to read it, of what a monograph looks like on the website. And the important thing to note is that a monograph is a curated overview. So this means that we do not have every single reference about a substance. So this is different to what you would find if you searched SciFinder or Reaxis or Scopus. We are not going to give you every paper that this compound is mentioned in. But what we are going to give you is the most useful and the representative papers of the work that is about this compound. So our criteria for including a paper in a monograph is that they must be peer-reviewed studies. So we are limited to journal articles and also to patents. So we have quite a few patent citations about our compounds. And the other thing we do as part of this curation is that we look for the most authoritative sources and properties. So if, for example, there are competing properties, we will look at all of those references and we will make a decision about which ones to include that are the most reliable and the most informative based on what we have available to us. So the first thing and the most important thing about the MerckIndex Online is we have to establish the identity of what substance we are talking, so that if someone mentions it, we can actually pin down what is this substance we are talking about. And with a lot of chemistry, the structure is the first step in establishing identity. And so we make sure that this structure is accurate. Sometimes if you go through the historical literature, these substances are not well identified, they're not drawn out perhaps as we might see them. And also sometimes, particularly in things like agrochemicals, there is actually specifically undefined, for example, double bonds or stereocenters, and actually that substance is represented as a mixture. And so one of the key things we do is actually try and drill down and work out what is the actual chemical substance we are going to talk about. And in this case, this is a relatively simple structure, but it also makes sure that this is the correct structure. Because sometimes mistakes can propagate through the literature, and one person draws it incorrectly, the next person takes it from their paper, and so on, and you end up with an incorrect structure that goes through time. So the other part of identity is, what do we call this chemical structure? And so in Merck, we will try and give things a title that is the most common name that doesn't belong to anyone. So for pharmaceuticals, this is something called the International Non-Proprietary Name. For things like this agrochemical, there may be a common name by which it is known. For some substances, we may go with the IUPAC name or a name by which it's been known through the literature. But we try and give our titles the most common name someone may know this by. We also include CAS registry numbers and the CAS name, which we get directly from CAS, and also any additional names. So some compounds have many names, and also naming systems have changed through the years. So we try and include as many names as possible, so that if you're looking for something, you can find it using its name. Have, in the case of industrial products, a manufacturer code and any trademark names that we can find. So the manufacturer code in particular is often used in early literature, particularly for drugs, and it will not have its name assigned by then, but it will have a code, and you can use that to track through the literature. And trademark names and their manufacturers are also important to capture, because some people may only know things by a trademark. Also have what we consider our standard chemical identifiers, molecular formula, molecular weight, composition, and we will also calculate the standard INCHI and INCHI key in case anyone needs to do some computational structures with these. The next important section of a monograph are the properties. Now, I mentioned before that our properties are curated. So what we will do is we will find the properties we can when we are researching our monograph, but then we will also compare and try and make sure that they are the best properties that we have. So, for example, a melting point with a smaller range that is done on more modern equipment may be preferable over a melting point with a broad range that was done 30 years earlier on some older equipment. And those are the kind of comparisons we will make. So as you can see in these properties, the kind of things we include are the crystal form and colour. We have melting point and a decomposition point here. We have some solubilities. We include things like the partition coefficient and the UV absorption. And we also will include some toxicity information if we have it. And this is a very good example of properties, but we can only include what people report in peer-reviewed studies. So it may be that some substances that you think should have a lot of properties don't have them because people have not reported them in a place where we can get to them. So the core of a MerckIndex monograph is the reference section. And this is where a lot of the work from the team goes into creating the content that is useful to you as users. So the reference section is simply the story of this chemical substance. And it covers generally its first appearance, any early studies on it, what it is used for, any perhaps regulatory information that comes up. So to give you an example, this is the references section for an agrochemical. And so when we're looking at an agrochemical, what we want to know is what does it do, how does it affect plants, maybe some environmental information about it, and also if there's any kind of risk assessment or toxicology studies. So in a reference section, the first sentence will always give you a very brief idea of what this substance does. So in this case, this is a diphenyl ether herbicide. So you already know before starting to read it that this is what this substance does. And then the references go through with the context so that you know what each paper or patent is there for. So for example, the next one is the preparation and herbicidal activity, and it's a patent from 1980 and 1983. And the key point is, for particularly industrial substances, we will always try to include the very first patent. So this is particularly important for drugs, but also, yes, for things like agrochemicals, where the patent given to a company can be important for their priority. And then going back on through, we see we have a root uptake paper, we've got the mode of action, we've got persistence in the soil, and we also have this European Food Safety Authority, which is part of the European risk assessment that was published in a journal. And so looking at this, you get a good overview of what this compound is for and what it is used for, and also if you have something particular about this compound that you wish to research, you have a reference as a place to start. The last part I'm going to talk about in a monograph are the uses categories. So these are more strict uses. So for anything that has been approved as a drug in human or veterinary uses, we will apply a therapeutic category, and these are all searchable. So on the right here, I've got the categories that come with caffeine. And for anything that's not a pharmaceutical, we can fill in a field called non-medical use, which again will give you a quick overview of what that substance is used for and any details about it. For example, this one says it's an agricultural herbicide. And that is the end of our quick run through the monograph. I'm now going to go to a live demonstration. Do we have any questions before I move on? I'm just going to swap my screen over. Are you able to see a screen of the MerckIndex online? Cool, thank you, Henry. So this is what our website looks like. As you can see, we have a very big search box in the middle, and this is our quick search. And when you come to the MerckIndex online, this is really your first place that you want to search. And this is good for if you just know the name of the substance you're looking for, or even if you know the CAS number of what you are looking for, you can just type directly into the box and you will get to your results. So I'm going to search for caffeine, and when I do, I get 18 results. The top one of which is the molecule caffeine, and then these will all have the caffeine related monographs. You can see there's some derivatives here, and also some things that may be related to caffeine. So if I click onto the caffeine monograph, you can see this is what I was talking about in terms of what a monograph looks like. We've got our identity, our properties, our references, and our classification, all for your information. And then at the bottom, I want to highlight that we have derivatives of caffeine. So in the MerckIndex online, we put derivatives underneath a main structure, generally when they are a crystal or salt form. So they are not a different substance, they are simply a different presentation of the main substance. So you can see here that we have a monohydrate crystal, and it's got some properties associated with it. And we also have a mixture with citric acid. And again, this is not a new substance, this is just a mixture of caffeine with citric acid. And this also has some properties, some references, and it even has some trademark names, which mean that this now sits under the caffeine references. So, a quick search is a very good way of finding potentially what you want very quickly, as it says in the name. But if you want to do a more detailed search, you will go to this search section here, and this is more of an advanced search. And what this lets you do is this lets you search specific parts of a monograph for the results that you want. So for example, we can do compound name, CAS registry number. You can search in specifically for veterinary therapeutic use. So if you were looking for a drug that had a specific activity in animals, you could put in your information there. We have non-medical use, and again, if, for example, you wanted to find a fungicide, you could just type in there, and then this will find things that had been labelled in the database as fungicides. You can search on manufacturers or just in the text. And what we also have down here are properties that you can search on. And we have a wide range of properties in which you can search. So you can search formula and weight. You can do boiling points, melting points, basically any of the properties that might be in a monograph. The only thing to note is, as I mentioned when we went through the properties section, is that not every monograph has every properties. We put every property we can find in a monograph, but that doesn't mean that we will get every single one that you can search for. But it does mean, for example, that if I'm interested in molecules, say around 230 molecular weight, I can search. This gives me 357, which perhaps is too many for what I'm interested in. So I can go back and I can change the criteria of what I'm looking at. So I will click the change this query. If I realise that maybe I mistyped or my query is too broad or too specific, I can just start a new search. But I'm going to go back and change this query. And I think, well, what else am I interested to know about the molecules I'm looking for? Maybe there's a human therapeutic use that I'm interested in. So if I click on that, I get this table, and this is a controlled list of terms that are in our human therapeutic uses. And so some of them are just one level, and some you can see open out to really quite specific terms. But say I'm interested in things that are analgesics, I can just click the top level, and it will search everything underneath it as well. So if I think maybe now I'm interested in molecules around this weight that have an analgesic property, I can redo my search, and I'm now down to 6 molecules. And this might be helpful for what I'm looking for to do next. I can click into the monographs, I can start reading some references, and I can generally explore these contents. So we've gone quick search and the advanced search. The last way you can search the MerckIndex online is through a structure search. And structure is the language of chemistry. So if you want to do either you paste in a molecular structure because you don't know the name or the Cas number or anything that will help you find it, you can put in a structure. You will click this edit button, and a drawing canvas will come up. You can draw your structure, and then it will put it into here to be searched. Or the other option is you could do a substructure search, which will again do a structure search, but where this is only part of the molecule that you're looking for, and you don't have to draw the entire thing. If you are doing a substructure search or a similarity search, you can combine it with the text search and the property search that we've done previously. So you can actually set up quite a complex search over several different fields to try and narrow down what you are looking for in the MerckIndex online. So those are all our searching options, but we also have a browse option. And this came in really because users of the book told us that they missed being able to just flick through a book, have it open at a page, and read about something they hadn't seen before. And so if that is an experience that appeals to you, or you just want to find something, then you can just browse to by letter, or we even have a random monograph button, which will just take you to something that you've never seen before, and you can read about an entirely new area of chemistry. So our last 2 sections on the website are these named reactions and reference tables, and these came over directly from the previous book, and we don't keep them updated, but they are a useful thing to be able to see. So our named reactions is actually a compilation of organic named reactions. So I click on our reactions begin with M. You can see that they are all listed, quite a few with an explanatory graphic that tells you what this reaction does. And if I click in to the Madelung synthesis, you can see we've got the very first reference for the synthesis. We have a brief overview of what this reaction does, and then any further references that might be useful. This is not updated anymore, so this is a static resource, but if you are interested in organic named reactions, this might be something that you might find useful. And the very last section I'm going to show you are the reference tables. And these are the appendices that came out of the Merck book. And they may be useful if you are, for example, dealing with old literature. So they are relevant to the conventions we use in some of our older monographs and also older literature. So we have abbreviations, we have Greek alphabet, we have prescription notation, and just things that might help you understand older literature. So if you find you are struggling with potentially some conventions in older chemistry reporting, then this is a useful place to look. And that concludes my walkthrough of the MerckIndex website. Are there any questions before I go back to the presentation?
I have a short questions. Could we use the SMILE format to search some compound?
I think, let me check on, you can convert your SMILES format on the structure search.
Oh, it is.
So so if you click convert, you can put in a SMILES or an INCHI, and then you can click OK, and it will draw your SMILES here for you, and then you can run your search from there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, let me get back up to this one. So the next section I'm going to talk about is, now that you have seen the content in the MerckIndex online, is how we as a team put that content in. Because obviously there's a lot of historic content, but we still need to keep finding new things that are relevant to our audience to put into the product. So, as I mentioned, about half of our content is pharmaceuticals. So we monitor both the human and veterinary drug approvals for the FDA in America, the EMA in Europe, and the PMDA in Japan. So we try and keep up with all the new drugs that are approved. There is generally a delay in putting those into the MerckIndex online, because what we need to do is wait for all the clinical papers to be published after the approval. So drug companies tend not to publish until their approval is through, and then they will publish their clinical trials. And because we include those clinical trials in a monograph, we sometimes have to wait a few months in order to put them in. We also look for agrochemicals in databases and find some new agrochemicals when we can. As a team, we also do focus areas, and this is when we decide that there is an area of chemistry that could use some monographs, and we will make an effort to write a group of them. So we've had focus areas on energy materials, we've had focus areas on lab reagents, so things you might find in your laboratory that didn't have a monograph in the MerckIndex online but someone might want to look up. And so we go through, and it makes it easier if the same basic research can apply, so you kind of know the language of the area you're doing. We also look at news articles. So for example, there were some pesticides that the EU banned a few years back, and we went through and we made sure that they were all in the MerckIndex online. And in that case, we actually did some very large updates to those monographs so that they reflected the most modern views of those substances. And another big way we find content is users. If someone writes us an email and says, I expected to find this substance in the MerckIndex, but it's not there, then that is a good case for us that someone is interested in that. So we have put in drugs that, for example, are approved in a country where we don't routinely monitor the approvals because someone has said, this drug is important to me. And we've gone, yes, there is enough content there to write a monograph, and we have written it. We also have a member of the team who, every time his dog is prescribed a new drug, checks it in Merck to make sure we have good veterinary drug coverage. So having an idea of a substance to include is great, but then we have to actually find and write the monograph. And what we do is essentially, for each substance, is a very extensive literature review. And we use a range of different platforms to cover the literature. We look at the patents as well. And then from that very large literature review, we filter it down to the key data that is about compound and also the authoritative data. So if there are things potentially that aren't core to the story of how this compound, if say it's a drug for cancer, if it had, someone's just testing it in a computational study for antiviral activity, that is not as core to us as it's, for example, preclinical studies in cancer models. And so those are the kind of decisions sometimes that we will take where some references are not as useful to someone who's learning about this substance, for example, as an anti-cancer drug, than others. And also we will make sure that our data, we will take the most authoritative data from our entire corpus of literature. And again, the Merck monographs are not designed to be comprehensive. You will not find every reference that you would find in Scopus, Reaxys, SciFinder. But what they are designed to be is a good introduction to the substance. So my last things to tell you about are changes that are coming to MerckIndex Online. We have a new website that is currently in development, and it should be arriving later in 2022. Now, the content of the MerckIndex Online is not changing. All that we have done is essentially improve the user experience in terms of searching and in terms of being able to read records. And this new website should come into beta very soon. And when it does, when you go to the current website, you will see this green and white banner, and then you can click on that and go through and try out the new website. So the new search interface, you can see, is actually really not that different to the old one. It's just a bit cleaner, and a lot of the work has been on the data structure and on the processing behind the search, so that everything runs faster and more smoothly. And the only main big change to the monograph is what we've actually done is we've tried to make it easier to read. So the MerckIndex Online as it is now is very much based on how the book was formatted. But obviously books have limited space, whereas a website doesn't. So as you can see in here in the references example, what we're trying to do is space out those references, so as someone who's coming in to read it, you have a better chance of being able to understand this quickly. And if you do come to our beta website when it is launched, please do send us feedback, because we are in a process of user research and user feedback, and we can make it better if something doesn't work for you. But it's important to say please tell us. Because we can only make it as good as someone tells us that it needs to be. That is everything from me today about the MerckIndex Online. If you have any questions, if you have any suggestions for content, please get in touch at rscindex@rsc.org, and that email address goes straight to myself, to Adrian, and to Sarah. So you will get right to us, and that is everything about editorial content. Any questions for sales normally goes to Henry. And yes, this is our URL, and thank you very much for your attention today.
Thanks, Helen. 不知道今天各位目前有没有什么问题？其实这个就像刚刚 Helen 说的，如果说将来各位碰到我们的 beta 版正式上开始用的时候，如果有什么问题，其实我们今天为什么邀请 Helen 还有他的 team 来参加的一个原因，本来我们预期我们的 beta version 应该会在 Q1 到 Q2 的时候应该会 launch， 那因为现在时间时程稍微有些延后，所以我们想趁这个机会 先跟大家给大家一个 heads up，就是说将来如果我们 data 上线之后，在使用上我们会希望大家能够直接给我们意见，不一定要到这边到 A 斯德这边一样，我们会转发到 Helen 他们这个 team 上面。那任何的意见对我们的这个 beta 的一个升级来讲，都会是非常有用的。那当然，就今天这个部分的话，如果目前各位有任何的问题，也欢迎各位提出。
如果没有人问，我先问一个。Thanks for the amazing presentation. I have a short question. As we know, the data-driven research is more and more important, and the demand for the high-quality database are also rising. I just wonder if RSC has any clean roadmap on the launch of the batch query service or data pack for data mining or machine learning purpose.
So for the MerckIndex Online, not yet. For ChemSpider, which is another database, there is the possibility for API access and batch query. That is a database of small molecules that contains over 100 million structures. But what it doesn't have are the number of references and the curation that MerckIndex has. But for that is currently where we can get machine access to a lot of data very quickly. For the MerckIndex Online, we are still discussing this because a lot of our data is free text. And so it is, this is something that we are investigating as we go, how best that we might be able to make that available, and also who would like it. But ChemSpider, which is another database we have, definitely has that kind of access.
杨江，我这边可以再补充点。I'm sorry, Sarah. I think that I can add up some inputs here. 杨江，我这边可以再补充一点因为 MerckIndex 上之前我们好像有提供给过有一些 sample 的这个档案，就是如果要去做 data mining 的，我们有给过一些 sample 的档案。那实际上MerckIndex 我目前只能用这样的方式去提供。但是我们刚刚如 Helen 讲的，我们另外一个 ChemSpider 的数据库，还有其实包括我们的期刊的内容部分，其实我们现在已经在朝可以用 API 的方式去做一个 data delivery， 这个是目前我们已经在探索，而且已经有，或者是另外一个方式，我们就是可能是用一个所谓的 secure web 一个云端的一个方式去做一个数据的一个传送，但是对默克来讲本身的话，我们目前还没有办法去使用这样，可能就只能用一个批量，但是可能是用数据，譬如说我存在一个硬碟里面这样去提供，但是它的格式我认为据我的了解，现在可能还并不是能够完全满足要去做一个很好的一个 data mining 的一个那个 quality data 的一个需求。
是，谢谢。
不客气。那不知道各位还有没有什么其他的问题？没有吗 ？Okay, so it seems like that everyone is quite shy, but I'm so glad to have you here, Helen, Sarah, and I believe that if we come up with any problem with our question from the customer in Taiwan, I will definitely contact with you and looking for your help. So thanks everyone， 谢谢各位的时间。那如果后面再有什么问题，欢迎直接跟菲斯德或者跟我这边去做一个联系。那我们今天的 session 大概就到这边结束。OK， 谢谢各位，拜。